Tonight, we're going to work on procedural textures, and we're going to finish up that handrail that we started off. This is my node tree that I did. And when you hold Control and hit the space bar, you can zoom in on a window. So if I click on my 3D viewport and Control space bar, that makes that the whole screen. You just hit Control space bar again to fix that. So once more, here's what the material is going to look like. It's shiny metal that I made with semi-reflective surfaces. And again, this is the node tree I used to create it. Oh wait, that's the other texture because I clicked on, here we go. This is the node tree for the polished metal. And I'm going to walk you through it. Oh, perfect timing. So I'm just going over procedural materials. So first I started off with the principled BSDF and material output, and you'll see they're still connected. And the Node Wrangler add-on that everyone should do, it's Edit, Preferences, Add-ons, and then Node Wrangler. Just enable that, make sure it's clicked on, and whenever you add something, just hit Save and Load, just to make sure it's there next time. And we learned last class, I'm going to duplicate this. So Shift D, I'm going to drag it up here, just so it's not going to interrupt me talking. All right, so if I hit Control T, that automatically adds texture coordinates, mapping, and an image. So if you want to place an image, this is a fast way of doing it. And you'll notice I have those first two nodes, but I changed out my image. That's what makes this procedural. We're using noise and textures generated in Blender to create this look. So I'm just going to left click to select it. Oh, and you know what? Let me get out of here. I'm going to turn on my screencast before I forget. That's like my kryptonite when I'm teaching this. All right. Where's that duplicate? Here it is. Okay. So Control T with principled BSDF selected gave me the texture coordinates, which is how it's going to be either UV unwrapped, generated, or from object. Mapping, which allows me to set up the location, rotation, and scale of how this is going to be displayed. Now the image texture I'm going to get rid of. So I left click to select it and hit X to delete it. Okay, so this is where I incorporate my noises. And just a reminder, for the photo PBR, photorealistic texture, that shortcut is Control Shift T. And then you go to where your images are at, and you got to make sure that you go on the right path. So I did Onyx tiles, you go regular, 3K, or whatever resolution, and you have to select all of them. And then you click the principled set texture. But for this was just Control T. Okay, so Shift A is what you use to add your nodes, same as adding an object. And I'm going to want a noise texture. I'm going to click right here. Now, Node Wrangler makes things easier for adding in nodes, but it also has this great feature. If I hold down Control and Shift, that was Control and Shift, and I click on that node, it's going to show me what the noise texture is doing. So I can preview what it's going to look like before I bake it into the rest of my material. So there's your scale, your detail, roughness, and distortion. Now you'll notice distortion makes things more wavy. That's what that does. And obviously, the smaller the scale, the bigger the noise is going to be. And the larger the scale, the smaller it's going to be. So I'm going to just reset these values. And, I'll just delete that node. All right, so it was Shift A, noise texture, pop that back in. So what I did was I had this and I loop cutted it, Control R with my mouse wheel to give it lots of phases to get better shading. That's in edit mode with the whole cylinder selected. I hit U to unwrap and then chose Smart UV Project and then just kept the defaults. I can tab out of there. So since I smart projected this, I can use the UV. Otherwise, I would probably use object. One of the things to watch out for is if you choose object and it's moving around, your noise and your procedural texture may change as it's moving through the scene. So I UV unwrapped it. I'm going vector out to vector in. And holding down Control, Shift, and clicking, that's what my noise is going to look like. I can get a preview of it right up there. And we'll just do this for now. So I'm going to add another noise to this. I'm going to go Shift A, and this time I'm going to do a Musgrave texture. I'm getting all this just by clicking the search box. And you'll notice you can have multiple textures to make whatever procedural texture you want. You just have to make sure at the end of the day, you're mixing them together. And I'm going to go over all these steps. And just to be fun, I'll add a third one just to show you. All right. So I've got two textures, and for every texture you add, you have to go vector out to vector in. So it's using the UV of this image, and for every texture, we're going to be making sure we go vector out into it. And I'm going to Control, Shift, and left click. This is what Musgrave looks like. And already you can see how that's sort of like the reflection on a metal railing. So I'm just going to right click and set that back to right about here. And you could adjust the detail to get the look you want. And then when you slide around with the others, you'll see what those do. But right off the bat, this is pretty good. All right, so let me just cut that. To cut a node strand, you hold down the Control key and you right click. You'll see a knife appear, and that's how you cut the node strand. Hold down Control, right click with your mouse. So I'm just going to reconnect that. Okay, so strategy time. I'm going to show you what I did down here. I added a color ramp. And so a color ramp, you could go from one color to another. Like I could go from blue to red if I wanted. But I kept both my color ramps grayscale, going from black to white, because when we're working in After Effects, we learned grayscale values can be used as displacement and, for maps. And it's the same thing in here. I'm using grayscale because at the end of the day, they're going to be my bump map, which will add some depth to this flat cylinder without creating extra geometry. All right. So we got all this. I'm going to put my color ramps in just so my information stays grayscale. So we're just going over procedural textures, and I'm recording this, so you've got it. Other people have more pressing things than to give me their attention, so yeah. All right. So I want this to be pure grayscale information so that I could use it for displacement and other types of mapping. So I'm going to add a color ramp, Shift A, right here, and I'm going to keep it grayscale. I'm going to go factor out, FAC is short for factor, to factor in. And I'm going to go color out to base color. And we would be seeing that right here. So that's what it looks like with the whole node strand connected. All right, now I'm going to need another color ramp, and since I'm lazy, I'm just going to duplicate it. Shift D, drag it straight down, and I'm going to go height out to factor in. Remember, it's gray to gray, gray to gray, purple to purple. It's pretty easy, and then yellow to yellow. Now, remember, like I said, if you hold down Control and right click, that gives you the knife to cut node strands. And I did that because we're going to need to mix these two together to have a fun time. So Shift A, search, mix. Okay, now, the old Blender, they had Mix RGB and a Mix shader. They got rid of that and just made the Mix node. And you go, well, what do I do now? Because I need to go yellow to yellow. This drop-down menu, you can go from float to vector or color. I'm going to go color. Now we're mixing color, just like in the old Blender. So I'm going to the top mix and the bottom mix. And now I can say, I'll go my yellow out to my base color. And down here, what you're seeing is if I slide this around, it's going to change the color of the material. I'll hit undo. So I fed that in, and that made my default color of, the railing. You can also say, all right, well, I want this to be the reflectiveness map, which is roughness. So I'm going to go out and into roughness, which I did down here. And now that would affect how reflective the surface is. You can dial in your look by sliding your your color ramp sliders to get the look you want. And remember, pure white will be one thing, pure black will be another. So roughness is how reflective. So pure black might be zero reflectiveness at all, and pure white would be 100% reflective, like glass. I don't want that for metal. So what I did is I clicked on the little color swatch and I made it less than black, so a little bit above it, and I did less than white a little bit before it hit pure white. I did that for each of these, so it'll never be purely reflective or purely deflective. Okay, that's just part of my strategy. So I fed those going in, and that's what gave us not only some color to the railing, but also the reflectiveness. Additionally, I made it 100% metallic because it is a metal railing. Look at the difference between this and that. It's night and day. Okay, so I made it a metallic surface, and then the reflectiveness is being fed in through this node strand. And lastly, I went the mix out to a bump node, which you get by just going Shift A, search, type in bump. That's how I got that. And I went the result of this into the height, then my normal out to normal in. And the strength, you really don't want to go wild with your bumps because then they look unrealistic. So what I ended up doing for my final texture was strength 2.7 and that distance. Watch what happens when I increase the strength. It starts to look like tree bark. And that's not what the railing would look like. So I'm going to hit undo. Okay? So that's what strength and distance. See the difference when I increase the distance? I'm getting the same thing. So I want something more subtle. And just a reminder, Control Spacebar will give you a full screen for whatever panel you're clicked on. And this was my final node tree for the railing you're seeing. I'm going to leave that up for one more second. And I said I would add another texture just to show you what that looks like. So I'm holding Control Spacebar to go out of my full view. So right here, I'm going to go Control A, and let's try cloud. No, let's see. Let's do a sky texture. See, just typing in TE for texture, I don't want bricks. Image would be placing in an image. And I can mouse wheel to see even more of them. So there's tons of options. Experiment, play around, see what you like. I'm going to do sky. So I'm adding a sky texture. Now, since there's a new texture I'm using, I have to go purple out vector to, will this even let me do it? No, that's the fun thing. There is not that. Okay, so that's for the world environment. Okay, so Shift A. Let's try a different texture then. Let's try magic texture. That sounds mysterious. I've never used this, so I'm going purple vector out to purple vector in, and I'm just going to Control Shift left click to see what that does. And look at that. That's got some, wow, that's something. It's got emission, it looks. So depth 2, changing the depth gives us more color and also changes the direction of the noise going through it. All right, so let's see scale. Let's take that down a little bit. Distortion, see, that's getting pretty trippy. Let's make it a little bit more just for the fun of it. Okay, now remember what I said, I don't want this color information. So I could just Shift D, duplicate my color ramp. Now I have to feed this into a mix node. So I just box selected these. I'm pressing G to grab to move them. And I need another mix node. So I can select this one, Shift D, duplicate it. And I can say, this one, I'm going to cut all these. This will go back into my roughness. And that's going into my base color. Okay, good. So now I need this gray to go into here. And this result needs to go back into my height. I just Control Shift clicked on Principal BSDF to see what this is doing. Factor will change between your mix. So if I want that to be more subtle, sliding to the left is doing more of this noise and less of the magic. Sliding it to the right, you see the magic coming back. So that's how mix nodes work. You can feed multiple textures in and then change the strength of the blend to get the look you want. Like such. That is an intro to procedural textures. It's procedural because we're just using textures in Blender. We're not using images. And we're using grayscale values to give us this displacement and bump that you see. Any questions on that? All right, so I'm going to quickly go over the recap for edge loops here, and then I'm going to talk about a mistake I made, because I already said last class, I'm going to make mistakes on purpose so you can see what mistakes look like and how to troubleshoot them. Because if I do everything perfectly, you're not going to learn that way. All right, so to do our edge loops, I've got my cylinder selected. I'm going to, let's line this up really. All right, so Y is the direction I want to slide it on. G to grab Y. And about here, I'll start my curve because I want it to be going down the stairs. So I'm going to hit Tab to go into edit mode. Shift D to duplicate it on the Y. R to rotate it, so it's only rotating on one axis. Nope, see, it twisted a little bit. So I need to be in a pure straight on. Let's try front. Let's try, I'm using my tilde key. Let's do left, here we go. R to rotate, oops, I have them both selected. Tab into object mode, here we go. Oh, and I gotta make sure I've got X-ray mode to select all of them. There we go. I keep doing it. All right, so tilde key, left view, R to rotate. Now it's only moving on one axis. And I want to follow the pitch of my stairs. So I'm going to try and make that angle as good as possible. Now I need to move down, which is my Z. So G to grab, Z to move. And here we go. It's time for the magic. I'm going to go into solid mode just so you can see it more easily. See? Less chaos to work with. We already don't have an end face to this. I'm going to turn off my X-ray mode. Don't need it anymore. So remember up here, vertex select, edge select, and face select. You could also do 1, 2, or 3. I'm doing 2 for edge mode. Now I only selected that one edge. I need to get the whole loop of uninterrupted edges. So I'm going to hold down Alt. Now I've got all of them. Go do the same thing here. Alt and Shift and left clicking to get those. And now I just need to bridge edge loop these. So those faces are open. I'm going to right click and choose bridge edge loops. Then I use immediately, before I click anything, I go to my review panel. Up, don't need twist. Oops, daisy. Let me do that again. Right click, bridge edge loops. Here we go. 0 twist, number of cuts. Why did that happen? Is this a face? Let me see if I can. That is a face. X, delete faces. Okay. X, delete faces. All right. Didn't look like it, but it was. Holding down Alt, zoom it in. There, I got that edge loop. Holding down Alt and Shift. Right click, bridge edge loops. Boy, you're getting lots of mistakes tonight, which is good because you're learning from it. Now it should be. So I'm going to add a cube. Shift A, cube. G, say Y, move it over here. All right, now I'm going to tab into edit mode. 3 for face select. I'm going to, no, not yet. I'm going to select all this. Shift D. G, Y, move it over a little bit. Now I'm going to rotate it a little bit. All right, now let's test this out. X, I'm just lining these up a little better. All right. Go. 3 for face select. Delete that face. Delete that face. 2 for edge select. I'm holding down Alt to get, and then over here, Alt and Shift. All right. Right click. Bridge edge loops. Now let's test it out. Okay, now it's working. I don't know why it wasn't working before, but must have been that merge that was doing it. Had to clear that out first. And it was also the profile factor. That was messing it up a lot too. So when you run into a wall, you know, just create something new and test on that. And that was it. That was the culprit. I just had to find something new and work off of it. All right. Let me check what else I've got scheduled for tonight. Yeah. That's right. I got to show you how to fix that mistake I made on purpose. Okay. I'm going to go back into my render view here. Zoom in a bit. Let's try my camera view. All right. I will drop down to Eevee just so we can see this a little bit faster. All right. Someone tell me what's wrong with this picture. Well, we're not worried about the pole. I just threw that in to show you. There's something horribly wrong with this picture. I'll give you a hint. I'll bring my mic with me. Okay. Has anyone ever seen tiling do that?
Oh, yeah, you're right.
So in my head, I'm like, I'm going to put stairs here, but I created a ramp. And the tiling would not be following the pitch of the ramp. The tiling would still be going straight up and down like the rest of the building, okay? It's little things you gotta think of. So I was like, oh, this will be a fast, easy shortcut. It's not, because it was following the direction of the planes, okay? So I'm going to show you how to fix this. All right. So I'm gonna go to solid view just because it's faster. And I'll just switch my view. And I need to get this stuff back here. All right. So I'm going to do edit mode, number 3. Go delete these faces. You want to make sure you get the right ones. That looks like it should do it. Yep, that fixed it. So now what I can do, because I still have geometry to work with, I'm going to want 2 for edge select And I'm going to extrude this out. So I'm just going to go, which way do I want to go? Y. Is it Y or X? X. See my X? I'm looking at my gizmo. E, X. We'll go straight out. And I'm also going to grab this one too. EX, straight out. Okay, great. Now these need to be taller. So I'm still at edge mode, holding down shift. I'm just going to go EZ, make them taller. Now let's take a look at that with our camera. See, that's more correct with what it should be doing. Now I just got to get the floor. And that's just going to be EX again. And I'm just going to need to make these edges a little wider. So I'm going to go E, drag that out. E, drag that out. Okay. So basically fix that. So I'm going to select all, hit U, and Smart UV Project, and that fixed it. See? All right, now quick pop quiz. Let's fix this railing real fast. So I'm going to go back to object mode because remember that's what you do for moving objects, and I want to go on my Y. So G to grab, Y. Okay, that's better. Now we're almost there. If I wanted another staircase going up, like this wasn't the first landing, I've already got stairs. What's going to happen if I duplicate them? Well, here's just, I'm doing this because really this is a very simple scene. It's a square that we turn into a room and a cylinder that we're using for a railing. And the steps are rectangles, okay? And remember this golden rule, if it's not changing, you're better off just instancing it rather than duplicating it. If you duplicate it, you double the geometry, you increase the render time, and the file gets larger, and things can go awry. You instance it, you've got more than one of it in the scene, and it will render faster, and you've got less geometry. Any changes you make to the original will happen to the instance. So some ways it can help you out. So everyone understand the difference between a duplicate and an instance? To duplicate, Shift D. To do an instance, Alt D. So I'm going to instance my steps by pressing Alt D. And I'm going to move these G, Z, just move them up. Now I'm going to hop into my left view just to make it easier on myself. All right, I'm going to, let me see, RY, nope, RX, nope, RZ, yep. I'm holding down Control to snap it. Now I'm going to need to go GX to move them back, GZ to move them up. Oh, look at that, we're almost dead on. GY to bring them over that way, okay, that's what that's doing. Right up to the wall, sure. And let's move them forward a little bit. And actually, there would be a little bit of a landing. I'm going to hold down Shift to move it slower. Alt-A to deselect. Hop back to my camera mode. Now we can swing that camera around. And now we're getting somewhere. Okay? Now remember, EV is less realistic. I'm going to go to my rendered view. Far less realistic. This is EV. I'm going to switch. Render engine is the back of the camera. I'm going to switch over to cycles. And now we can see I've got more light coming in because we opened up that and we have it going properly. And we've got the shadows behaving. And if I ever want to add some extra realism, I could put some lights up here. So to do that, I'm just going to go to my left view. I'm going to go to solid mode. Shift A, I'm going to add a cube. There's a cube. And I'm going to want long panel lights like you'd see in a subway. So I'm going to go S scale Y. I'm using my gizmo to tell me which way to go. And let's go a little less than that. And I want them shorter. SZ, so that they're not as deep, because the lights won't be that deep. And I'm just gonna move it up, G to grab, Z, and let's see when it's near that. G, Z, and I was just using my mouse to position my camera. 3D mouse is, a 3-button mouse is really super crucial when you're working in Blender. Okay, that's flush with that. And I'm gonna have two of them. So I'm gonna go G, X to slide it over. Now I'm gonna create my material. And this is gonna be a simple material. I'm just gonna click my material over here. I'm gonna call this light. I'll call this Hall light. My materials right here. Here's my properties panel. Whatever you have clicked, it'll change what property you can adjust. So I'm just gonna give it material. And I'll call this light. And I just go down to my emission. And my emission needs to be stronger than the world lights. And what that means is I just got to make it strong enough that you can see it. And let's check out our settings here. Oh, we went to cycles. Okay. That's right. Let me hop over to EV real quick. Let's take a look at that lamp. Oh, my emission is set to black. So let's pick a color. Let's do white, but like a yellowish white. See, now we've got this. And there it is right there. So that's what it looks like in Eevee. Now if I go to my render settings, change it to cycles. That light should be casting down pretty decent. Let me change my camera a little bit. And you see it reflecting over here in the railing as well. So I'm going to increase that strength a little bit of my emission shader for that light. Oh wait, that was the wrong thing I'd select right here. There we go. Now it's really lighting up the scene. See the difference? So I'm going to lower it a little bit, and I'm going to duplicate it. Shift D. Nope, that's the wrong way. Alt D, because remember I was just saying, hey, if you're doing something that you're repeating, I'm just going to make an instance of it. So if I select the original one, I say, you know what? I want this to be more cool looking. Every lamp I made off of that was an instance automatically updates. That's another benefit to instancing. And another thing, let's say I want this thinner SX. The instance should update too. So let's go, oh, there we go. Is that my lamp? Yep. I'll go SX, scale down, nope. I'll just select them both then. Oh, look at how it's really kicking up those reflections up there on the ceiling. Interesting. Yeah, so just creating lights using shapes and emissions is another possibility to your scene, and that added that extra bit of realism we need. You could also duplicate these and have them going up your stairwell too if you wanted. So that's just a little bit of an introduction to the difference between cycles and Eevee. Eevee takes a lot of work to make it look right with the lights and the reflections, and once you go down that route, you can basically take as much render time as you would if you did it in cycles. So you go for Eevee for that more stylized look. Let's see if there's anything else. Oh, yes. All right, this is the last thing I'm going to go over. Render tests. I'm going to do my render test in cycles. Go drag this out. And let's get our framing the way we want. Let's go for something dramatic. Just for the fun of it. I might need to go to my camera right here, properties panel. Let's do a little bit wider. That's what's giving me issues. See already, that's far more interesting in the composition. You got your leading lines and all this. All right, so yeah, we'll say this is what we're doing. Okay, so when I told you before, if you're doing just a single image, you can use the AI denoising in Blender. And I'm also going to show you the Compositor too. All right, so I'm going to turn on the noise threshold, denoise, turn this on. And your default is 1024, and I think this one is 4096. That's the default when you open it. And this is a noise threshold of 0.01. Okay, so you got two different render settings. You got your viewport. If you don't need that much detail on your viewport, that's just for moving stuff around. So dropping it down to 100 for your max samples. See, already the scene is pretty still and I can look at it. Now, if I go 5,000 and I make a change, it's going to take a little bit more longer for it to update. So I can just get by with 100 for my viewport. I'm going to close that so it doesn't distract you. This is what you're rendering at. Now, 4,000 samples at 0.01. I'm going to let it render for 5 seconds, just so we can watch what's going to happen. So I'm holding down Function, F12, or you can go to Render at the screen. I'll show you that the next time. So right off the bat, this is all we have done so far in 9 seconds. So I'm going to close that render. This is how you render test. You know, you make changes as you go along. Performance, I'm still in my render settings, which is the camera. Use tiling, I set that to 400. That's a pretty good one. Now, the first thing I'm going to change is instead of 0.01, I'm going to get rid of the first 0 right here and make it 0.1. Now I'm going to hit F12 again. And already, look at that. And just like, look at the difference. The AI denoising software is pretty fast. Like, that's 13 seconds. We rendered the whole scene out. See that? So that was pretty fast. I mean, surprisingly fast. I was not expecting that. So I have my GPU compute on, of course. If that's grayed out, just a reminder, you go Edit, Preferences, System, right here. You want optics. Optics is the best. CUDA is second best. If you can click on the first option, yes, do that. Do not click on your Intel Core processor. Like I said, optics is your best bet and your NVIDIA card. And whenever you make any changes, save and load. Okay, another thing you can do to speed up your rendering is right here in your light paths. Now, let's see, transparency. I don't think there's that much transparency, so I'm going to lower this down 1. And my diffuse, I'm going to crank this up to 9. My glossy, I'll take down to 5. Transmission, I'll make 4. Volume, there's no volume. Now my highest value is a 9, so I got to make this greater or equal to that. And this time, I'm going to hit render again. 12. And our last render was 18.84 seconds. And I changed the amount of light that's being distributed with those settings. And look, 13 seconds. We shaved 5 seconds off, and it still looks good. Okay? So we're in the right ballpark. So now I'm going to introduce you to the Compositor, and then you're going to see how doing compositing will slow down your render but give you a better result. So right here in 3.5, the Compositor is right here, and I already have used nodes clicked on. I'm zooming out with my mouse wheel. And a reminder, Control plus the spacebar will make it full screen if you need to. So denoise already popped in because I'm using the AI one. So I'll keep that there for now. And I want to add one more node, Shift A, always Shift A to add, glare. So this is a far more complex animation and scene. Here's my compositing node tree. So I'm up in my Compositor. I denoised it with all of the denoising data here, and I turned off all the AI stuff. I knocked my samples down to 100, for a faster render because this is animated. I think it took like 6 hours to animate. So Shift A to make the denoise node. I went image to image, purple, denoising normal to normal, and then albedo to albedo. Those are both yellow. My denoise went out to my glare, and then I just fed these to the viewer in the compositor. And I'll render a frame and show you what that looks like. Going back to layout. And function F12. I think this should take about 30 seconds to render with all the compositing and denoising and effects on. And this is at 100 samples. And while that's rendering, let's see if I can hop back to the other scene. So I'm here. I'm going to go to my lights so you can see what my lights were set at. Here's my light paths, a total of 9. I did 5 for diffuse, 3 for glossy, 9 for transmission, 0 for volume because I don't have a volumetrics. Transparency, I had 7 because I did glass. I needed that look. So I'm going to let it see it's initializing execution. It's still doing the glare and the denoise. You can already see some noise here, but you'll see the image change in a moment once it's done running all that post-processing. See, noise is gone. There's the glow from the glare. And that's with 100 samples. So that's how that works. I'll go back to my compositor. I have backdrop clicked on, and you can see in the background the image that we just rendered. So if I were to increase my threshold, let's decrease it a little bit. Wait for this to update, and you can see the glow is far more dramatic than it was before. Let's decrease the number of streaks, wait for it to update, and then you'll see the image change in the background. I could go from streaks to ghosts, wait for that to update. See? And it's just how you experiment, you know, getting different looks, using the drop downs and changing your settings. Threshold, just like in After Effects, when you're doing glow, that's how much of the image will be receiving that glare effect. And you see you got ghosting artifacts from the glow bouncing off. Like that. V, when you've got your render in the background, will zoom you out. Alt V will zoom you in. V to zoom out, Alt V to zoom, V zoom in, zoom out, Alt V to zoom in. Okay. Go back to my layout, and I'm going to close this without saving.